How are you guys doing? It is Monday, September 28th, 2020, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, of course, I'm going to preview the 2020 NBA Finals to continue on this path that we've been on, of course, at least since the beginning of the bubble, filming the last 9 games of the regular season, of course, the play-in game for the Western Conference, on every single day of the playoffs, except for, of course, my birthday. But, of course, it's been a long journey, and now the 2019-2020 season is officially coming to a close. The NBA Finals start on Wednesday. There were 30 teams that started out, and now there are 2 remaining. There are 28 teams whose seasons are officially over, and right now their next goal is to focus on the draft and get ready for next season, except for 2 teams. And of course, I'm going to preview by taking it conference by conference just to show you just how both teams went. So the first team to advance was, of course, the Los Angeles Lakers. They advanced on Saturday night. So just to take you through their trip through the playoffs, of course, they finished with the best record in the league, led by LeBron James and Anthony Davis, who were both named to the All-NBA first team. LeBron, I believe, he finished runner-up to the MVP. I think he finished second in MVP voting to Giannis Antetokounmpo in his age 35 year, as he will go on to average, I believe, 25 points and 10 assists. He led the league in assists. And of course, Anthony Davis, in addition to being a first-team All-NBA, he was named to the first-team All-Defense. I think he was the runner-up to Giannis in the Defensive Player of the Year. So these are 2 players that were, you'd have one player who is arguably the best all-around player in all of basketball, which I think is the best player in basketball. And you have a player who is arguably the best defensive player in basketball, and that is Anthony Davis. So, of course, they had a bunch of other players on their team leading along the way. You have young players like Kyle Kuzma, and you have a lot of veteran players on the team. You have JaVale McGee, Dwight Howard, who led the Orlando Magic to the NBA Finals a year. They had a really great team, but of course, Dwight Howard was a top 5 player in the NBA at that time, arguably top 3, with LeBron and Kobe. But there's Dwight Howard. You have Rajon Rondo, who was the point guard for the Boston Celtics championship in 2008. Danny Green, who was a sniper shooter for them when the San Antonio Spurs first lost, then beat the Miami Heat in the NBA Finals. Those are all the same players on the same team. They of course had their struggles, of course, in the playoffs, and everyone would write them off. To which I would say, they're still the Lakers with LeBron James. When LeBron James is a favorite on a playoff team, he doesn't lose normally. But to carry on, they went on into the playoffs. The first team they faced was the Portland Trailblazers. After the Portland Trailblazers beat the Memphis Grizzlies in their play-in game, Damian Lillard was already named the MVP of the bubble. But they were carrying that momentum, and the Blazers were able to beat the Lakers, I believe, in the first game. They beat them by 7, but then the Lakers would go on to beat them by 23. In the second game, they beat them by 8 in Game 3, beat them in 20 by Game 4, and they beat them by 9 in Game 5 to eventually gentlemen sweep the Blazers, essentially. In that series, Anthony Davis would average 29 points and 4 rebounds, averaging over a steal and a block, and LeBron James would come in and pitch in incredibly well, averaging 27 points, 10 rebounds, 10 assists, over a steal per game. And while he was shooting 60% from the field. And, of course, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Kyle Kuzma would average double digits, and they would go on and essentially just destroy the Portland Trailblazers. In the next round, they would take on James Harden, Russell Westbrook, and the Houston Rockets, who were trying to operate their small ball offense around Mike D'Antoni just to try to see if that would work. But, of course, the Lakers would put the Houston Rockets away in that series in 5 games. This game, the Houston Rockets took the first game. They beat them by 15. The Lakers would beat them by 8 in Game 2. They beat him by 10 in Game 3. They beat him by 10 in Game 4. And then they end up beating the Rockets by 23 in Game 5 to eventually put the teams away. For the Lakers, LeBron James would average 25.8 points, 10 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 steals, and over a block and a half again per game. Anthony Davis would average 25 points, 12 rebounds, 4 assists, and over a block per game. Kuzma would average 11.2, Rondo would average 10, Danny Green would average 9 points, Markieff would average 8, and Alex Caruso would average 8. So that's 7 deep that were averaging 8 points a game, at least a bucket per quarter for the series. And this was a 5-game series. It was just a well put together series by the Los Angeles Lakers, and yet another gentleman sweep where they let the team win the first game and they just carried on. Going on into the conference finals, they went on to face off against the Denver Nuggets, who at that time, it had already come back from down 3-1, literally twice. They were down 3-1 in the first round to the Utah Jazz. They were down 3-1 to the Los Angeles Clippers, and they were able to make it to the Los Angeles. They were able to take on the Los Angeles Lakers. The first game, the Lakers beat the Nuggets by 12. The second game, they beat them by 2 in a very close one. The Nuggets beat the Lakers by 8 in Game 3. The Lakers would beat the Nuggets by 6 in Game 4, and they would beat the Nuggets by 10 in Game 5. LeBron James in the series would average 31 points, Anthony Davis would average. Their elite power forward, Anthony Davis, would average 31.2 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, and a little over a steal per game. LeBron James would average 27 points, over 10 rebounds, and 9 assists per game in all 5 of those games. Additionally, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope would average 11, Kyle Kuzma would average 9, Dwight Howard would average 8 and 5, averaging a steal and a block per game. Rajon Rondo would average 7 points and 7 assists. Just a great all-around performance yet again from the Los Angeles Lakers as they were able to knock off the Denver Nuggets, who had been down 3-1 before, but this is the first time they actually lost. And that was their trip to be the last team remaining out of the Western Conference, out of the Lakers, the Clippers, the Denver Nuggets, the Houston Rockets, the OKC Thunder, the Utah Jazz, the Dallas Mavericks, and the Portland Trailblazers. And the Memphis Grizzlies. Technically, the Los Angeles Lakers were the one team to make it through. They were the number 1 seed. They were the favorite the entire time. And even though they didn't face the Los Angeles Clippers in the Western Conference Finals like they all expected, they had a very tough road to the finals and kind of did away with these teams very easily. But, of course, they were the one team out of the West. So far, there are 14 teams in the West that are focusing on the draft right now. The Lakers are the one that are focused on their next basketball game in a couple of days. In a couple of days. And then looking out to the East, looking at how the East formed. Coming out for the East, it'll be, of course, the Miami Heat, who finished with the 5th seed in the East, led by Jimmy Butler, the only player on their team who would go on to make an All-NBA team, who make the All-NBA third team. Of course, they're being led by Eric Spoelstra, an amazing coach. And of course, he has they have an amazing crop of young players around them. Bam Adebayo is starting to turn into one of the NBA's best players as he was named an All-Star for the very first time in his career this year. They have Goran Dragic, who has been an amazing player, especially because he started out in the Suns. I forget where he was before the Heat. I don't know if he went straight from the Suns to the Heat, but Goran Dragic has been an amazing player who's been named an All-Star a couple of times. Not to mention Jimmy Butler, because of course I'll mention him again because he's been good. You also have the talents of Andre Iguodala, a veteran who's made the last 6 NBA Finals, I'm pretty sure, because he made the last 5 with the Warriors. And, of course, they have Tyler Hero, their young player out of Kentucky, who's playing incredibly well for them. They just have a lot of players, and they run pretty deep. So this is a team that I would not want to face in the playoffs. And, of course, they also have Jay Crowder, who's been playing incredibly well on both sides after he was basically cast off from the Cavs and the Jazz, I believe. But going on to their first series, they would take on the Indiana Pacers, who were seeded 4th. And they would pretty much sweep them. The first game, they beat the Pacers by 12. They beat them by 9 in Game 2. They beat them by 9 in Game 3. And they beat them by 12 in Game 4. In that series, Goran Dragic would lead the way, averaging 22 points, 4 rebounds, and 5 assists, and over a steal for the series. And Jimmy Butler would be the number 2 guy. He would average almost 20 points, over 5 rebounds, and 4 assists. He averaged 2.5 steals per game and a block per game in the 4 games that he played. Tyler Hero would average 16.5. And, of course, he's a rookie. And this has been an amazing playoffs for Tyler Hero. And I think he's gotten better and better every series, but let me digress. Bam Adebayo would average 15 points and 11 rebounds. And Duncan Robinson would average 12. Jay Crowder would average 9.8, which is almost 10. That's 6 deep. The Miami Heat have been running like this basically the entire series. Jumping out to the second series they played, after sweeping the Indiana Pacers, they went on to face the Milwaukee Bucks, where the Milwaukee Bucks were favored after beating the Orlando Magic in 5. And in this series, the Miami Heat would do away with the Bucks in 5. They beat them in 5. In the very first game, the Miami Heat would beat the Bucks by 11. The second game, they beat the Bucks by 2 in a very close game. They beat the Bucks by 15 in game 3, where Giannis Antetokounmpo got hurt. When Giannis didn't play, the Bucks beat the Heat by 3, but then the Heat would do away with the Bucks by 9 in game 5. And just looking at how this series panned out, Jimmy Butler was the main guy for this series, averaging 23 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists, while averaging over a steal and a half in those 5 games. Goran Dragic would average almost 20 points per game and 4.5 rebounds and 4 assists, averaging over a steal per game. Bam Adebayo would average 17 points and 12 rebounds. Jay Crowder would average 15. Tyler Hero would average 13 off the bench. Duncan Robinson would average 9. And those, again, that's them running 6 deep. And you have, of course, Kelly Olynyk doing his part, helping the Heat win. But they would do away with the Bucks in 5 to earn them a spot in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Boston Celtics, who had gone through both Philly and Toronto to get to where they were. And in this series, it would be the longest series for the Heat, not the Celtics. The Celtics took the Raptors to 7, but in the first game, the Miami Heat would beat the Celtics by 3. Second game, the Heat would beat the Celtics by 5 to go up 2-0. The Celtics would win game 3 by 11, but then the Heat would go up 3-1 by beating the Celtics by 3 in game 4. The Celtics would stay alive in game 5 by winning by 13, and then in game 6, the Miami Heat would win by 12. And looking into how the Miami Heat fared, how their players went, Bam Adebayo would lead the team in scoring this series. He'd average almost 22 points and 11 rebounds, averaging 5 assists, over 1.5 steals, and averaging a block per game in all 6 games. Goran Dragic would average 20 points a game, or he would average 20 points a game for the second series for the second series of his third series this year. He would average almost 4 rebounds, over 4 assists per game. Tyler Hero would average 19 points off the bench. Mind you, he's 20, and he was still doing this. He had an amazing performance. He turned into the hometown hero, because he scored 37 points in one of the games, so he definitely went off. He's been an amazing player so far in the playoffs, and he was a big part in helping them go through. He wouldn't even average more than Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler would average 19 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists with over a steal and a half. And that's 4 players averaging 19 points in the same series. But, I'll keep going on. Duncan Robinson would average 12 and a half. Jay Crowder would average 11. That's 6 players averaging double digits in 6 games in a 6-game series. And this Heat team is getting stronger by the game. And right now you see where these two teams are matching up. They're going to clash on Wednesday for the very first game of that series. And I don't know if you're familiar with how I guess now there's no need to go 2-3-2 for home seating for home court, but it's still going to be very interesting. I have no idea how they're going to incorporate more fans into the bubble, how they're going to try to do that. This is going to be the very first NBA bubble, the first bubble NBA finals. And this is going to be a very interesting one. Of course, the storylines match up where it's LeBron James playing for the Lakers, facing off against his old team. Jimmy Butler making it to the NBA Finals, being the best player on his team after being told he was a locker room cancer and that he couldn't play well with others. The way the Miami Heat have basically rebuilt themselves up from the big 3, and they didn't really tank, but they were able to utilize not even high lottery draft picks to build their team around and help turn them into a perennial team, a very unstoppable team where not just one or 2 players are controlling the offense. I like the way this Heat team works. Works very unselfishly. And by getting the Heat to the finals, I think Erik Spoelstra, even though he was already a goated coach, but people have been giving him a pass, or people were just overlooking him because LeBron James is on those teams. Erik Spoelstra is already officially an elite coach by getting this team here. Not saying anything about the players, but there were more talented teams that the Heat made it through to get to the finals. And of course, they were able to play well together. I think a lot of it goes to Jimmy Butler's leadership. He's a really good leader of men. I'm really impressed by the Heat's path to get here. And don't get me wrong, I think that every single as long as they're playing, they have a fighting chance. I still think the Lakers I think the Lakers take this in 4 or 5. If LeBron lines up on Jimmy Butler for the entire game, I don't think the Heat can still score and play a lot of great defense, and they can score a lot of baskets without Jimmy Butler. If LeBron James takes Jimmy Butler out of the series, the Heat are out of the series, and I think that's what's going to happen. And of course, the Lakers are still a favorite team. I'm not going to bet against LeBron James with a favorite team. And as great as the Miami Heat have been, I don't think I don't think it's going to be a close series. And don't get me wrong, if the Heat win and the Lakers lose, I mean, you have all the right in the world to clown me. All I'm saying is it doesn't seem very likely. And if I'm a betting man and I'm trying to go in for like the money, I think the Lakers did gentlemen sweep their other teams. I don't think I would take the risk in saying that saying that the Lakers sweep the Heat, but I realistically think it'll be 5. They'll probably let the Heat win 1 game, but I don't think the Heat match up to the Trailblazers that well. I think there's a big drop off in talent. I think they beat the Trailblazers, but I don't think they beat the Rockets. I think there are teams that the Lakers have gone through in the West that are much tougher opponents than the Heat. And the Heat, of course, they're mentally tough. They made it through the East, and I'm not gonna say they took any shortcuts. They beat the Bucks and the Celtics, which a lot of people said they had no business beating. The Heat play incredibly well. They haven't faced off against a team that's the caliber of the Lakers in the playoffs. And the Lakers have easily dispatched of teams that I would argue are better than the Heat. I would say the Nuggets. I think the Nuggets would have beat the Heat pretty comfortably as well. But they're not in it. The Lakers are. In terms of how I think that series is going to go, I think the Lakers win in 5. But it's been an amazing journey just to get right here. And once again, I appreciate you for listening to all 16 minutes of this. Once again, it is Monday, September 28th, 2020 out here in this quarantine. Thank you once again for listening to my piece, and peace out. I hope all is well.